I never dreamt then that in a few years I will have the privilege of becoming his full-time colleague at the George Warren Brown School of Social Work. Since 1974, when I arrived at Washington University, Professor Parvis had been an indefatigable partner in internationalizing our student body. He enthusiastically accepted my invitation to serve as coordinator for international admissions in our MSW program. In that capacity, he vigorously and imaginatively recruited students from many distant lands. He worked closely with the university's international office, wrote frequently to U.S. embassies abroad to secure visas for our admitted students, and made numerous telephone calls all over the world to assist, advise, and advocate for our international students. It was not uncommon for him to accept cheerfully telephone calls at odd hours in the night from an anxious or panicked potential international student who is having difficulty in obtaining visa or in meeting a university or government requirement, and then to advise him or her calmly and sensitively about the best way to handle the situation. Quite often, he would go to Lambert Airport to receive incoming overseas students, host him or her in the Parvis family quarters until an appropriate accommodation was found, and then help the student settle in his or her new premises. He would provide useful tips to newcomers about buying groceries and other household items, and about such trivial appearing matters as registering for a course, selecting a practicum agency, and applying for financial assistance from a local, national, or international organization. In all his community and international work, Dick received unfailing support and cooperation from Kay. Their home was often frequented by international visitors, and Kay's weekly outings with wives of international faculty set an example of constructive educational hospitality that is hard to match. No wonder the Parvises have friends throughout the world, as I personally and pleasantly witnessed in Puerto Rico in 1976 and in Tokyo in 1986, when I was a co-participant there in very well-attended international conferences. Professor Parvis was a remarkable social worker. He was a true community developer. The work that he, Kay, and Ralph Pumphrey did in the Boot Heel area is solid and has made a difference in the lives of thousands of families. He was a genuine internationalist. He served for many years as the Secretary General of the Inter-University Consortium for International Social Development. It was largely because of his patient, passionate, and practical leadership that the George Warren Brown School of Social Work has become the chosen destination of the largest number of international students in any MSW program in the nation. A quiet and unassuming gentleman, his commitment to international social development and international social work education was both inspiring and infectious. He was one of the real heroes, one of the real builders of this wonderful school. His former students in this country and elsewhere remember him as the personification of the many cardinal values of the social work profession. It was my good fortune that I knew him for so long, learned so much from him, and worked so closely with him. Shanti Kanduka. I'll now turn the program over to John Parvis, and thank you very much for all being here.
Thank you, Dean Lawler, and your staff at George Warren Brown School of Social Work for helping to make this gathering possible. They made all the arrangements for this room and other things here. On behalf of the Parvis family, I want to thank you all for coming. Some people came from further places than others, but everyone that came is appreciated. You've already heard from Dean Lawler and Shanti Kindika about Parv from a more professional point of view. I'd like to tell you some things that I think helped form the man that my father became. My father grew up in Milwaukee, son of Audley and Raymond Earl Parvis. He had a younger brother, Bob. As a youngster, I visited my grandparents' house that my father grew up in. That helped me visualize the stories he would tell of his childhood, where he was exposed to the gangs of his day, the dreaded Teutonia Avenue Indians and the drugstore cowboys. Certainly doesn't strike the fear that the Bloods and Crips have today, but they were part of what led my father to later working with neighborhood gangs. My father was a great storyteller of his experiences. One of my favorite stories from his early days was totally out of character, but I'm sure that there was a lesson learned. Dad came home from school, grade school, just a few minutes ahead of brother Bob one day. And spying a bowl of apples, grabbed the biggest and seemingly most perfect one. On closer inspection, a wormhole was discovered. The apple was put back, and Bob was offered the first choice. Bob took the big shiny apple, took a bite out of it, and then discovered the surprise inside. Mom Parvis gave Dick a lesson in ethics that made sure that didn't happen again. But generally, my father was the protector of little brother against the gangs who would try to shake down a kid for pocket change. Pocket change was a big deal in those days, he would tell us. You could take a streetcar to the movies, see a double feature, and buy a hamburger on the way home for around 35 cents. The Depression had minimal effect on the Parvis family. His father was employed installing automatic telephone switchboards, and so there was always food on the table. His father encouraged thrift and savings, and so my father put his hard-earned paper route money in a bank. But the bank failed. His father made up the lost money, and a family saying was born: "Son, your money with me is safer than money in the bank." His mother was a minimalist regarding possessions. If something wasn't being used, it was either given away or thrown out. One summer, while away at Boy Scout camp for several weeks, he came home to find that his prized canoe was gone from the basement. His mother gave it away because he wasn't using it. I think that scarred my father for life, because if any of you have ever visited their home, you know things came in but rarely left. Parv was very active in Boy Scouts. When he saw firsthand a friend being forced out of the Scouts because of his appearance due to scars on his face, he quit. He did not tolerate bigotry or social injustice. These were core convictions even at that age. Parv took undergraduate work from Ripon College and then received a MSW from Wayne State University. While there are some that think of him as Dr. Parvis, a master's was the highest degree you could get in social work at the time. But if you still wanted to refer to him as Dr. Parvis, he didn't correct you. My earliest memories of growing up in Minneapolis were of growing up in Minneapolis. Parv worked at a social service agency. In those days, men wore white shirts and ties, and when coming home after a long day at work, a detour was made first to the garden to see how the beans and tomatoes were doing. My mom had to work real hard to keep those shirts white. Gardening was a way for him to unwind. I can't remember a home without a garden. If you were fortunate enough to visit him at his home in Clarksville, you know how proud he was to go out and pick some fresh produce and share it with you. As kids, we grew up thinking that carrots and celery sticks were snack food. My parents were the original health food junkies. They were into soybeans before anyone else had even heard of them. My mother would make yogurt at home that they mixed with their orange juice every morning. I thank my parents for a good dietary start. Holidays were, but especially Thanksgiving, were wonderful times in the Parvis household. We always had foreign students come for meals, and we learned that people are people no matter where they came from. We're all so much more alike than different. All visitors were asked to sign a guest book, and it was full of addresses from exotic places around the globe. In 1959, the movie Around the World in 80 Days came out, and we all went to see it as a family. The story my father would tell is that after seeing the movie, we kids all cried that we never get to go anywhere like that, what we saw in the movie. You never take us anywhere, is what we said. Parv then told us that our prayers were answered and that there was a good chance we would be moving to India soon. What a way to get kids to give up friends, Little League baseball, and trumpet lessons. Actually, I didn't mind giving up the trumpet lessons. The family moved to Lucknow, India, where my father taught at the university. He met Shanti Kindika, and there were many, and there, Shanti Kindika there, and many of you know how that friendship turned out. The picture on the back of the program shows my father in a traditional Sikh turban with a fake beard. Some of his students did the makeover, and it was quite convincing. My father always taught us, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. He lived it, and so did we.